Hello, everybody out there in the listening land. Welcome to another episode of Visions and Voices podcast. I'm your host, John Stewart, partner here at Armanino, where I co-lead our family office industry. With me today is a colleague of mine, and honestly, one of my favorite colleagues of mine, Morgan Stinson. She's an amazing talent here at Armanino. Morgan, please introduce yourself.
Hi, thank you, John, for having me. First of all, my name is Morgan Stinson. I am originally from Detroit, Michigan, but I live here in LA, and I joined Armanino not too long ago, but have made some really great strides. So I am our relationship manager, and I focus on office, sports, and entertainment here at Armanino. My background is I'm a reformed auditor. So I've actually,
Are you really? I don't think I knew that
yeah.
about you. A reformed auditor. My God, like, yeah, I don't take you for an auditor whatsoever. Maybe it's why I say like I'm a reformed engineer. People never believe it. They're like, you were an engineer. So
Really?
yeah.
Yeah,
Keep going though. I want to hear this.
I think it's just because like our personalities are so different than what you generally see in a
I think
company
that's
as.
100% correct. Yeah.
Yeah, but I spent number of years, working on various industries. I actually started in financial services. So I used to audit fund things like banks and insurance companies and things like that. And so just over, the years, I realized that my gift was not behind an Excel
Yeah.
sheet.
How many nights were you crying to sleep about auditing that you're like, I need to change this? Because that's what it goes through my head. I would be crying.
Exactly. And I found myself always talking to the client. Like if we're on client site, they're like, "Where's Morgan?" It's like, "Oh, she's in the office with the CEO, just like hanging out." It's like, "Oh, I met him at the coffee stand and we just had a great conversation." And
These stories don't fool me. I know this is you. You're an amazing connector. You're very good at this. Yeah.
yeah, so then when I moved to LA, I mean, my accounting world has really opened up because where I'm from, we don't have a big entertainment practice. So there's not a lot of support that you see, especially from like a business management or a family office perspective. So when I got to LA, I was like, oh, I can definitely step from behind the spreadsheet now. And so I
I
learned
like
about
that.
the
You
world of
step
business
from behind
management.
the spreadsheet. We got it.
Yeah.
You should have your own podcast and call it that. But yeah, keep going.
Thanks. You know what? Actually, you might be onto something,
It's a
John.
great idea, actually. But okay, we're going to pin that because I
Yeah.
want trademark. But yeah,
Yeah,
go.
you heard it here first. You heard it
Yeah, you
here.
heard it here first. Yeah.
So yeah, and then went into business development and started just tapping into my network that I've had for so many years and grown and continued to grow here at Armanino and in LA. And I've just been very privileged and blessed to sit at tables and be in rooms with people that have definitely helped me grow as an individual. So
That's awesome. So, I mean, I love this because you've kind of created. I love self-made individuals where you saw a path you wanted to take. You were in one field and you're like, this just isn't me. And that happens to, I think, the majority of people. And you're like, well, but I want to move. And I think that's the hardest part because it's one thing to recognize that this just isn't my thing. It's another thing to have the courage to go down a path that nobody else is probably telling you to go down, but you just know you want to.
yeah,
And that takes a lot of courage. So what inspired you to go take that leap?
honestly, becoming a parent, to be honest.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that'll do it.
Yeah. So, sometimes we get like just comfortable as to where we are. And I had been doing it for 7 years at the time. And so I had a daughter and I was like, I need to explore my personality. This is not a ladder that I wish to climb in the audit world. Like what else is out there for me that I can use my talents for? And so at the time, the company that I worked for, the CEO was a mentor of mine. And I
Oh,
went to
okay.
it and I asked him, like, if I wanted to be you, do you see me being you from the seat that I'm in? And he was like, no. And I was
Dude,
like,
that's a
oh.
great question to ask and a great question to get. Like you really want that honest feedback. You don't want someone to just bluster you, right?
Yeah, and you always want to speak from like where do you want to be in life? Like what position do you want to serve in? Like what company or organization do you want to work at or do you want to own? And I couldn't see myself being extremely successful in the audit world just because like the drive wasn't there, right? And so
Yeah.
he was like, just take a chance at business development. And I was like, what's that? And he's like, sales. And I was like, oh,
Yeah, it always comes with a weird connotation, right?
yeah. And he's like,
Yeah.
but it's more than that for you because you've developed so many great relationships. being able to be of value to them instead of an expense, which is what most accountants look at themselves at. And no one loves to see an auditor coming, let me tell you.
I don't know how our auditor colleagues do it, to be honest. It's not something I'd ever wanted to explore, but yeah, it seems like you have to have a certain mindset to really be like amazing in that field, which obviously we have a lot here in Armenia that do that. But yeah, I'm curious your experience.
And then there was a gap. Like I saw a gap between how accountants communicate or even just operate in environments. Like we were so used to sitting behind desks that it was like, and of course this came like at the very beginning of the pandemic,
I was
before
going to say,
we
is
were
this a
shutting
pandemic
down.
realization? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, before we, lucky me, let's go into
Yeah.
sales that requires me to be outside, and then all of a sudden a pandemic hits. So that was really reality because you had to really tap into those relationships.
How did
And
you handle that? Like, what did you do? I mean, everybody has a story of how they had to pivot during that time because it was a weird part of time in the world. But how did you address it?
I have a really weird story.
Oh, okay, I like weird stories. Good thing no one's listening. Go ahead.
So I joined business development in when Super Bowl, so February, like January was my start for
Mhm.
business development. So my first event was Super Bowl in Miami. Went to Super Bowl in Miami, came back and was sick immediately. And the pandemic started. And I was like, what am I gonna do? But then I realized like no one really cares about me. We just care that we're all trying to figure this out. So I was like, I have some time. I can figure it out. And I got on this app called Clubhouse. Do you remember that?
I don't, but I want to hear more about it.
Okay, so there was this app that Andreessen Horowitz like heavily backed and endorsed.
Okay.
And it was like a social app where you make a profile and you go into these rooms and it could be people from any and everywhere talking in these rooms, talking about like different categories or different
Oh, I do know what
topics.
you're talking about. Yeah, and you
Remember
can have
that?
like
Like
little
Elon
mini
Musk was
meetings.
on there, like
Yeah.
bunch of
Yeah.
random people that you would never actually get to talk to, but like if
Right.
you get called up on stage, you are having a conversation with them. So I got on Clubhouse and was in the rooms with a lot of different people and ended up like selling all of the business that I needed to sell for my sales goal by like April off of Clubhouse.
I'm not really surprised. That's awesome.
So I used it was like a podcast. It's like a live podcast. So I just used that to, one, spread my message, spread what I awareness about what I was doing and who the like how I could impact the market and those people that were in those rooms.
Yeah.
And like that's how I met a lot of family offices. I met a lot of CEOs. I mean, athletes themselves, entertainers themselves. I mean, like I was shocked at how many people I was sharing and having
That's
conversations
so
with.
creative. And I think that's what it takes, right? Having that nonlinear thinking. You were looking for ways to still move forward and you had
I was
to
like,
get creative with it and you found
that's,
one. That's
yeah,
fantastic.
this is a digital world now. You had to figure out how to be in our pajamas and still close business.
True. We all had those years, didn't we? We don't do it anymore, but we did do
No,
it back then.
right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah,
Fuzzy
that's great.
slippers back then for sure.
Fuzzy slippers. Yeah. No fuzzy slippers now. Yeah.
No, not
Okay.
at all.
Well, let's go further into your career here. So, and you and I've talked a little bit about this before, but today personal branding is more powerful than ever, right? So, why don't you tell us how can family offices help athletes and entertainers kind of translate their brand equity, if you will, into like long-term financial gains to play? Like, what role do they play in helping here?
Yeah, I think that the offices really serve as the blueprint for
Mhm.
what athletes should aspire to be, right? And so or even entertainers. So a lot of their money is made at a young age or in what I like to say, like a spurt.
Yeah,
Because for an
they have to last
entertainer,
a long
it could
time.
be, yeah, it could be a young spurt, and then it could be you're cold for a while, and then you could get picked up for a big movie or a big gig, and boom, now you're on to your next spurt, right? And so it's a lot of inconsistent wealth when it comes to athletes. But
Hmm.
if they understood, okay, what is a family office? What is the structure? Then they could start implementing some of those tools and tasks when they're coming into their spurts of wealth. And so, what I would like to see, and I think that the entertainment community has definitely picked up that, right? And they
Hmm.
started with a better ecosystem or team around them to understand how to grow their wealth, right? But athletes don't have that. They never have. It's always
Yeah,
kind of
it's been always been a different closed off world that is from the outside looking in, has struggled with financial literacy. Have you found that to be true in your,
Absolutely.
has it? Okay.
Absolutely. Sports has been a fragmented industry for a while when it comes to income. One, because it's super competitive, right? And so,
Right.
depending on what your contract is and what you're going for, that doesn't lend to locker room conversation to be like, oh, and my lawyer is this person and my financial person, because it's so
I
competitive
just put
that,
more money into my IRA. Like that's just not something
yeah,
that comes up in a locker room. Yeah,
no.
you're just not gonna do it.
And a lot of it has been secretive. You know how like back in the day you never shared your salary with your coworkers because it was
Right.
like it's very similar.
Well,
Like
it's
they
like
did,
that. They
never
like
shared the
keep
sauce.
it
Yeah,
close to the vest. Like, no, I'm doing my own thing. So
exactly. And same with the agents and the agencies. Like it's just always been, a little bit more in the dark. Like let's keep them in the dark. And so now I think that one with self-education, because that's a big thing, but also to there are family offices that have interests in sports.
okay.
And so if they were willing to share or even help those understand what the structure needs to look like, because when you think of like an athlete or an entertainer, like they have all the components of a family office, but they just don't have the blueprint.
I agree with you. I can see it too. And you're like, well, why aren't they putting it all together the right way? And yeah,
Yeah.
so is it really that education piece of like trying to help them understand, hey, there's a better way to do this for you?
I think so. I think it's education. I think it's access.
Okay.
Like most people, and you and I talk about this, John, most people that you even come into passing don't really understand what family office
No,
means.
most don't. Most don't.
Yeah.
It's a foreign term to many. Was before I was involved in it, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, you have to kind of learn what it means and why it's actually important.
But honestly, if more people explained it as generational wealth, and that's really essentially
That's essentially what it is. It's a
what it
generational.
is, yeah, how to build and sustain that, I think that there would be a lot more opportunity, or we would see a lot more family office type structures pop up around some of those athletes and entertainers.
I think that makes sense. I mean, that makes sense. So if we talk further into like the business strategy of this, so some of the biggest names in sports have built empires, right? Like, you
Hmm.
look at LeBron James, Jordan, all the common ones we know about, but there's more than just that. Serena, great example too. That rival the most successful family offices because these guys it's the same kind of level of wealth, if not more, right? We're still talking about hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars at play.
Hmm.
What do you think separates those athletes who successfully transition from players to business and those who do not? Like this is getting further down that educate. Is it simply just education, or what has made that difference for some of those individuals?
I mean, education as well as I think that what separates them, like, so let's go back to like the biggest icon from where I'm from. I went to Michigan State, so Magic Johnson really
That's a good
is
one.
is
Yeah.
the first family office athlete that I've seen
Yeah.
from coming from my generation. And Michael Jordan owns Jordan brand, but still Nike
Yeah.
owns
Magic Johnson's
Jordan
done a different
brand.
approach though. Magic's
Yeah.
been more like a family office approach. It's a family thing. Him and Cookie, like they do their thing. Right. Yeah.
Exactly. Like he's been able to amass success that we haven't seen. And I think that even just coming from East Lansing and kind of my family being, around that era of coming up and seeing the difference in how like a Magic moved as opposed to like, let's just say like a Draymond Green, a
Hmm.
lot of what was established around Magic was true business opportunities for him to see himself as a CEO. And it wasn't
He's
necessarily,
been
I,
successful at it. I mean, look at all the businesses he's touched. They all tend to thrive. I mean, I know it's not always like that, but the majority of them have worked.
yeah. And that's the thing. Like, you have to build a successful team around you. You're not going to be the smartest in the room. It's impossible. You haven't even had the same years of education that we've had. And so, to
Is
under,
that a hard thing for athletes because they're used to being the guy or the woman, and now they've got to go trust other experts in fields they're not familiar with? Is that hard for them, or do you see that being not maybe not? I may be making that up.
yeah, I think it's a delicate balance, right? Because
Okay.
sometimes we see athletes over trusting, like
Yeah.
extremely over trusting to the point where they're turning a blind eye.
And
And
they get taken.
sometimes
Yeah,
we
which is
see
a
them
hard those are
not.
horrible stories. Yeah.
Right. And then the other times we see them not trusting their team enough and kind of doing things where they're not even divulging the information until after the deal has already fallen apart or the opportunity has died or there's an issue and now you definitely need help. But I think for the most part in sports, most sports are team sports, right? And you're
Right.
always relying on a coach.
Yeah, you don't do it
I
yourself.
think that
Yeah.
athletes are some of the most coachable humans on the planet because they're used to being coached all the
Because
time.
that's what they do. Yeah, that's the
Mhm.
world they live in.
But where I will say is a little bit of the ego gets involved of
Yeah.
don't know, but I also don't want to seem dumb or don't know what question to ask or
Right.
it's more of that. It's more of the ego embarrassment factor than the I don't trust, I can't,
I
I
could see
can't.
that because I mean, I can picture myself in a situation where that you would feel that, right?
Yeah.
And you feel this immense pressure to be the person with all the answers, but you know you don't have them.
Like that's usually what I see is like and then by the time they realize what's happening, they're crushed, right? Because it's like how did I not know or not see or what opportunities did I miss because I was, turning a blind eye or trusting this person. And so that's where, I kind of see there's a difference between the athlete that is successfully transformed into an entrepreneur and business owner
Right.
and that it's not the drive or the background that they have, it's realistically who they are able to harness in their network that they've now built to help them build out the team to execute whatever their vision is.
And that's a shift in mindset from like previous generations of athletes, right? That, when you and I were growing up, athletes, the vast majority of them just they played and then they retired and that was their life. There wasn't
Yeah.
much more to it. Not saying there shouldn't have been, it should not been, I don't know. But now it's different. You're right. This mindset shift into, hey, I can go approach wealth more strategically. What do you think has driven that? We mentioned education, but are there other factors you think that have, is it just, hey, we're seeing they saw the examples of the past and they can follow that? Or what else has kind of shifted that they approach it now differently?
Like I said, I think that barrier is now kind of breaking down a little bit
It
where
feels
we
that
are
way. Okay. Yeah.
seeing, yeah, we're seeing the older generations share their stories and storytell. Now we have the internet too, right? You don't have to just
Yeah,
keep them on the
information's ubiquitous. You can figure this out quickly now. Yeah.
yeah, and two, like you can learn from people's stories, and those stories are now out. Those stories are now available to people. You can Google, what happened with Garnett. You can Google those type of things to understand, you know, here are some pitfalls that people did, or I saw that this player invested in this, or they're talking about VC, or they're talking about funds. So, and I think that as generations get more sophisticated, as well as like we have NIL now, you're getting money in high school.
Right.
Um,
Or middle school even. Yeah.
yeah, I think kids are becoming more inquisitive about those type of opportunities. And because of that, like our pros that are younger or rookies are getting able to have access to that education and understand some of those stories and how to either not repeat them or repeat them if that's what they want to emulate. But I definitely think technology has closed a big gap for what we see athletes interested into, like very early on in the game now.
I think it makes total sense. So let's shift. So we talk about the early part where you're learning earlier now, which is helping. Let's shift to the end part. So let's say as the spotlight's fading, right? And retirement's coming for every athlete. This happens to everybody, right? Our bodies can only do that for so long.
Yeah. Mhm.
That financial pressure can increase potentially, right? Because you said it's all spurts, and now we're at a point where the spurts are probably going to stop. What are some strategies that family offices, in your view, could use to help clients who are in that situation, like create a more sustainable income so that it lasts and allows them to do other things? Like, what are some of the strategies you would see family offices deploying here?
I would say like structurally, so making sure first that the structure, like you have to have, if you have businesses that you've started,
Mhm.
understanding what they look like now that you're into retirement or in your later years of your career. So maybe that business that you started, 3 or 4 years ago when you were a rookie signing your first contract, maybe that business hasn't been performing well, right? And
Right.
so really establishing your CFO or your outsourced CFO, which would technically be Armanino, woo woo, and then
That's right. That's right. I got to put the
seeing
plug in.
yourself, yes, seeing yourself as the CEO, right? As whatever it is, if it's a brand, if it's If you are just going into retirement and living off of what you have already, it's still you are
You're still the
running,
CEO of that. Yeah.
yeah, you're running an enterprise of yourself at that point.
Yeah.
And then two, having a good lawyer, a legal team that can support whatever visions you have going forward. Because what happens is guys stop playing or women stop playing and they're kind of forgotten, right? And so as they're trying to wrap their hand around what's next for me, or I thought that this clothing company was going to be what I like, but really I hate it, those type of things need just a sounding board, right? And sometimes you don't realize your friends are not the good sounding board. You need professionals that can advise you on how you can start this, or maybe you don't have any money and you need a line of credit. Okay, so how do we figure that out? What can we leverage that you purchased thus far?
Right. You got to
Different.
meet them where they are and then help them move forward from there.
Exactly. And so, and then also to family office, the family office structure and access to deal flow that they have, that's something that even you and I don't really have access to. But because they love, they love athletes, they love entertainers, being able to transfer that knowledge and that access
Hmm.
is something that would definitely benefit them in so many ways too. But I think establishing that team is so important. You have to have a separation of duties. You have to understand what your
Right.
current business is or current endeavors, if you have a nonprofit, whatever it is that you have, and then be able to do like a health assessment or a financial wellness assessment to figure out how do you go forward. But
Yeah. Be honest with yourself. Look in the mirror. Have someone help you look in the mirror and say really where you're at.
yeah, because it's difficult, right? Can you imagine doing something your entire life and then what are you gonna do now?
And
It's
then
like,
in your mid 30s, having to stop it because it's not like you have a long life after that. Life isn't stopping then. So,
no.
yeah.
And you probably think about how many times we've probably changed our career or fumbled
Mhm.
something or had a good idea that didn't work. They haven't had a chance to even explore that,
That's a
right?
really good point. They've always been on one track the whole time.
On track. And so even when you wanted to explore that, sometimes you're told like, don't worry about it, just do this for now. And so I think that a lot of times we don't give them grace to understand that they are going to have a couple of failures before they decide what they want for themselves. And
Right.
it's not on our side as the business manager or the accountant, it's not our job to tell you what you can and cannot do, but it is our job to guide you. Here's where you can afford to fail. Here's where you can afford to try, and here's where you can't afford to try, right? And so helping them map that out is something that's important, but I think that financial advisors play the biggest key, right? They have been in the person's life typically for a very long time.
Right.
They've been relied upon, right, to give good advice. And so if your financial advisor is even willing to give you introductions to family offices or people that have tremendous amounts of wealth and that you aspire to be like, that's a really good opportunity for you as an individual to educate yourself on, okay, this is how I need to set up my structure. And maybe you don't have kids, maybe you do have kids. But either way, whatever you're planning for, you want to start then, right? Not when your career is being ripped from under you and now you
Yeah, it's pretty late in the game to start it then, and it's harder.
it's definitely harder. It's
Yeah.
it's and it's terrifying. Like
It has to be. Yeah. You're in your mid 30s, let's say on average, right? On average. And then that's when you're first starting to experience career failure, where the rest of us go through that in our early 20s.
exactly. I
Yeah,
can imagine if I
that's a
had to
very
like
different mindset and situation than the majority of us would understand.
yeah, exactly. And so that's why I was like I want to be in a position where I can help and where I can blend, what I know from the high net worth space to these high net worth individuals that just don't even know about how the high net worth space has functioned, right, historically.
No, that makes sense. Let's key on help because I know you're more than just doing this job. You've done a lot in the communities, and that's always impressed me hearing your stories there. So you have focused on financial empowerment in communities at times. Why is that mission so important to you? Can you tell us more about why you dive in on that area? I think it's great and inspiring.
Yeah, I mean, so I have an interesting background coming up. I came from nothing at first, and I saw my mom really educate herself and grow her empire in real estate and become, a self-made millionaire for her time. And in watching that, I have always found it my purpose to give back the education that I have. And so coming up, I started my career with Tom Izzo at Michigan.
Really, that's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I naturally had a lot of friends that played sports with me and that were in my classrooms. But
Hmm.
when I got close to graduation, what I realized is like they had never even taken or touched any classes on money at all.
Which is crazy to me, but I get how that happens, but that is just crazy to me.
Yeah, because most of them become like communications majors and
Right.
they
And they've never been forced to even understand what basic accounting is or just general finance.
no. And it even shocked me even more when a couple of my friends that I went to middle school all the way through college with, and they played professional ball, like they didn't even have credit cards until like I think it was like year 3 in the league. And I was
Mhm.
like, why don't you have a credit card?
Yeah, you need to build credit regardless, even if you don't use it, right? So
Yeah, but where we come from, they're like, we our
we
parents tell
don't
us not
need
to do
that.
that. Like, what do you
Right.
mean? We don't need a credit card. Debit card is all
Right.
you need. It's like, no,
You're
that's
like,
not
no, no,
the case.
that's step one. There's a step two, and then there's more beyond that actually,
Oh
but
my
that's just
gosh.
step one. Yeah.
And that's the thing. So like that's where I felt like my connection to my community, my family even, like me being the first accountant in my family, like yes, my mom is very smart independently, but she doesn't know a lot of what I know or even have, understand a lot of what I even do. And so I always felt a purpose to give back to the community in the form of financial empowerment as well as education as well as access. I mean, you can't ask questions that you don't even know
You don't even know to ask
exist.
them yet.
Yeah, you have no idea like what accounting is.
Yeah, you
Even
don't even
like
know to ask that question because it's been so not, you've been not exposed to a like a smidgen of it. You don't even know it exists.
no,
You don't know what you don't know.
no. And accounting is the language of business. Like without it,
It's
you
different.
really don't understand business, to be honest.
Yep. I
And you
agree with you.
also don't understand industries. So really anything that you start is just a shot in the
I
dark.
mean, this is a sidebar. I've never understood why we don't learn personal finance in high school across this country and other countries too. They don't do it either, but I don't understand why that's not part of a curriculum. But that's another sidebar for us because I've
Yeah,
never understood that. It feels like something we should all learn in a secondary education perspective, like when you're in high school, because screw getting to college, I get it, but like, shouldn't we learn this when we're like right when we're learning to drive and having to have responsibility? We should probably learn what
exactly.
financial.
Instead of learning how to make clay pots, we should
Yeah,
probably
that doesn't
do
help
that.
us. I don't need a clay pot. I need to understand what a checkbook is and how to balance it. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's the thing. And now, as you see, it's more important than anything to start at that level because now we have kids that are making millions of dollars at a high school level.
Which
And
is
that's
crazy. Yeah, you and I've talked about some of these athletes that are making way money, like, and they're like juniors and seniors in high school.
millions of dollars.
And I
Millions
think that's
of
great,
dollars.
but if they don't know what to do with it, I'd hate to see them be one of those horrible stories later of how they wasted it all.
And then, like, you read stories of, like, do you remember the story of Naomi Osaka where her mom stole $10 million? dollars?
No, I didn't know that. I don't think I knew that part.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew
And
who you're
she was
talking
a
about. I don't think I knew
young,
that.
yeah, she was a young athlete, like very
Right.
young. And in the middle of her career, her parents took $10 million dollars out of her account. But my biggest question was, what account did she have $10 million dollars just sitting
Just
in?
sitting there, they could transfer it. What's going on?
And why? But it's like things like that that it's like, it's so unfortunate that you just didn't know how to high level protect your assets, or you didn't have a relationship with someone that even
Was a
cared enough
trusted
about
advisor that you
you.
could trust from, yeah, that can come in and their only job is to make sure you're protected.
Yeah, because we can't like the difference I think between myself and yourself too, John, and a lot of people that we see in our industry is we care.
Right.
So there's a different level of effort, there's a different level of oversight, as well as like just a cadence of communication that is different when you care, as
Mhm.
opposed to, oh, I'm just here to get paid and I'll see you next year. And so I feel like, there are a lot of vultures out there, of course, but there's also a lot of great people. And as long as you're able to continue to educate yourself and move forward, you will find that advisory board to your life that you need. You will find and have access.
I like that, an advisory board to your life. You're coming up with really good one-liners today. This is great.
I'm dropping them today.
You are dropping them. We're recording it, so we'll go back and write them down later. Great. So
I think I think that because we care, we are able to go into the community, really speak to children as well as families.
yeah.
Mom is not mom is not okay. Like
Yeah, I'm
mom's
always
dealing
surprised
with
with how many stories you hear where the parents are controlling all the money, and I get that to a degree when they're super young. I get that, right? But there comes a point really quickly where that just should not be the arrangement you have, or not the only people involved. Like you said, there should be a board of advisors essentially that, okay, the parents can be involved, but you need outside third parties that do this for a living that can give right advice and are not afraid to speak up.
and parents aren't experts in everything too. And it's
Yeah, no, you can't expect.
being parent and manager and money manager and not messing up. Because that's another thing. No one wants to be the failure for their kid.
No,
You
you don't want to be that guy or girl. You don't want to be that person.
you don't.
No, no.
So that's another thing, like giving them education and tools, but that you got to remember, like it all starts with the nucleus. Like, where did you come
Yeah.
from? What access education did your parents have? And if they didn't have that, they're not asking the questions either that you're not
Yeah, they don't know
asking.
to ask it either.
No. So
Mm.
that's where I wanted to really, so a couple years ago, I developed a multimedia platform that helped educate athletes and their families and their communities so that one takes some pressure off the
I
athlete.
mean, that's what put you on our radar. Let's be
Oh,
honest.
really?
That's how we learned about Morgan Stinson. We're like, what is this woman doing? She's doing something really cool and awesome.
Yeah.
And that seems like the DNA that would fit here well with us.
Yeah, because everybody loves a good story, but are you listening for what the content is, right? And so I was trying to figure out how do we get them to, like, how do we get people to be engaged and listen? And hearing it from athletes themselves or entertainers themselves is much more engaging than me and you, no offense,
No,
talking
I know. No one
about
wants to really hear from us if they can hear from them, right? So
yeah,
yeah, that's fair.
exactly. And so, but then also, they explain it through the eyes of the storyteller and the experiencer, but how do we explain it in the eyes of the professional? Like, what does that look like? What are real tools that you and mom can sit down and talk about and execute on
Yeah.
and feel confident that at least you did that, you know?
Yeah,
So
because some
that,
of this is just baby step stuff. Like it's not hard to do the stuff that protects you. It's not really that hard to do that stuff. If you want to go to the advanced level, I get it. Maybe you don't want to do that or that's harder leap, but some of the baseline stuff is not hard to get done here.
no.
No.
And people just shouldn't look at themselves as talented individuals. They should really view themselves as enterprises.
I
Like
like
you
yeah.
make more than a small business. Like that's not a
Yeah, it's not
small feat.
insignificant. You should treat it like it's significant.
You
Yeah.
should. You should see
Yeah.
yourself as a family office. Like that's how you really should see
And
yourself.
that's where this term came out of, that high net worth individuals realized that it was a business and they need to run it like that. So they hire professionals to do that for them.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's what I would love to see more of, especially coming from those industries at least.
It makes sense. It's obviously a gap. So,
Yeah.
well, let's talk more about how some of these athletes that do go to the advanced level, right? They're
Mm-hmm.
becoming more serious players in private equity or venture capital.
Mm-hmm.
What unique advantages do you think these athletes bring to the table when it comes to these high stakes investments? Let's talk, right?
Yeah, I
So,
mean,
yeah,
they're walking NILs, right? And so
they
as
really are. Yeah.
soon as I mean, every VC wants to hear that LeBron James
Yeah, it's
invested
like
or
star cachet power,
oh
right?
my
Yeah.
gosh. Like
Yeah.
if LeBron's in, then definitely need to get in there. And it's like,
Right.
yeah, that's the superpower that they bring, right? If you can mention that those people are on your cap table
People
and
know the names and they recognize them and feel like, oh, if they stamped it as good, then it must be good.
yeah, but see, there's a caveat to that because it's like, do they even know that they're in it? And
Oh, interesting. Tell me more about that. So this happens without them knowing sometimes?
sometimes guys are invested in like different portfolios and funds and
Oh, right,
stuff,
because their advisors are handling it, so why would they necessarily know all the time? Yeah.
or they gave their friend an investment and didn't really know what it was. I've seen where guys get invited to like investment round conversations and like they don't even show up, so they have no idea
They're
what's
like,
going
why am I even here?
But they have to, that's the thing, like entertainers and athletes need to recognize that that's a superpower. They very much influence the financial market just based off of their brand that
So
they
that's
bring to the
interesting.
cap table.
Let's double click on that because that goes to the other side of this is now you're seeing athletes launch their own investment funds, their own production companies, their
Mm-hmm.
own apparel lines, right? So they're not handing it off to a third party and being subject to, I didn't know I was in on this. They're
Mm-hmm.
doing it themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what triggered this shift, or what do you see? What triggered all of that? Just the ability now that I can just go do it.
I think the the awareness has shifted. Like they do know that they have power. And some athletes have stepped into those rooms and seen how things are being built, seeing how you build a fund, seeing how you raise capital, understanding that, oh, well, if Jimmy's raising capital for that and he needs me to help be his marketing, ploy, I
Right.
can just be my own marketing ploy and do my own thing. And so I think, yeah, like that knowledge gap is closing a bit because people are recognizing, like, okay, I am bringing the celebrity. And sometimes they don't realize, like, just by you being you, there are people that, I mean, let's go back to boosting. Like, there are people that will invest in you just because you're you. Like,
Yeah, that's true. They will just because their
and
name. Yeah.
and so I think that as we become more sophisticated, both in the entertainer and athlete space, and get tired of working for others, like people have seen blueprints go
I think that's the
tragically.
big win is they realize they can be independent now. They
You
don't
can
have a
own your
core. They don't have an owner of an organization telling them what to do. They can just go do what they want to do now.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like that's what the internet has created independence, right? And
It
so
really has. It's made things. You're right. It's brought down those barriers.
And I think that it's great. I think that it's great that that people are starting things on their own and doing things on their own. I think that, pouring into what's close and near and dear to them. But what I just challenge everyone that starts a new business is to make sure that you have a solid team around you to at least coach you on what you're not considering, like compliance or
Yeah,
systems
know
or
the risks. Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of risky areas and there's a lot of cost associated with things like this that people don't realize too because they didn't know that they had to have insurance and they didn't know that there's things like that we just don't think about when
And
we
don't open a restaurant or bar, please, because that's just not going to last long. We know they don't last.
or don't invest in a franchise.
Don't invest in franchise. Those don't work out either.
I
Yeah.
hate those.
Yeah. There's some definite financial traps. It's like, don't do those, guys. It never actually works out. It's a low
And
percentage job.
and historically people have been doing those for
I
years.
know, I
It's
know.
been an investment strategy for a lot of people for years and it's like that is so old, so retro. Don't go
And
out and
there's data
risk
that
your
shows that it doesn't really pay out the way you think it does, right? Look at the data. Look at, like you said, the internet's out there now. Look at the data. Pull the data, have someone look at it for you and say, but look, your returns, the average return's not there.
And don't rush. Like,
That's
why do
true. There
guys
is no reason to
rush?
rush. Right.
They rush into like, I have a young athlete that plays overseas, and he got his first very large contract
Hmm.
recently, like last year. And he like, I got a financial advisor and I need to make some investments. And I was like,
I mean, it's good you did the first step, but the second step may not be necessary yet.
I don't even think you needed the first step, to be honest. I
Right.
mean, you're young, you're under the age of 30. You're barely brushing 26. We don't need to be
Just
making
put
crazy
it in an
investment
interest-bearing account and
strategies.
let it sit for a while, bro. Like you don't just don't spend it. Yeah.
Maybe you want to buy a house. Maybe we put some in a CD. Maybe we, do some smaller, safer investments. Maybe,
Right.
things like that. Maybe look at what your 401k is currently doing and kind of augment that, feel how we could augment
But start
some of
at
the
that
investment.
baseline. Right.
But getting into like real estate
Yeah. I
portfolios
need a
and
vodka brand. No, you don't. No, you don't.
you don't even really need to try and start like an Airbnb like business. It's not, we're not there yet. But that's the thing, like I think the pandemic made it so that everybody could buy stocks and be a trader. And so now they just think that they have to invest now, now, now. And it's like everything has a growth process, right? And so at what stage you're in, like let's make sure that fits there. Whereas you're not just giving all your money to a financial advisor because you're like, nah, I
Is
just got
that
some
the
money.
is that the big tip you would give an athlete early in their career with that first big contract is like hold, save right now? Like how would you
Yeah.
what do you say to them?
I mean, my biggest tip to an athlete is to make sure that your financial advisor is registered and
Good
accredited.
point. Yeah.
That's the biggest
You can
thing.
check that.
You
It's
can.
absolutely checkable. Yeah.
And know what credentials go with them, right?
Right.
So that's probably step one. And then my other biggest piece of advice would be to take the money that you're getting on your first contract and work with someone to budget out realistically what you would need for 3 years to live. And then
Okay.
try your best to live as close to that line as possible. Because unfortunately, when you're first starting out as a rookie, you could even be draft first or second round and you could be a Henry Ruggs.
Yeah. And
You could
there's
lose
no
it all.
guarantee that next contract comes, right? There's no
Right.
guarantee.
Exactly. Or you could get cut from the team or get hurt or
Yeah.
I mean whatever is guaranteed to you then, that's what you need to understand is guaranteed
That's the world you
life
should
right
focus
now.
on because you're right. It'd be great if there's another one that comes, but you can't count on that.
No, you can't. And then also to making asset purchases in your rookie contract is probably the biggest mistake you can make.
I would think that's so well documented. I got to agree with you. Like, why? Don't do it. I know there's
Buy a
this
house, don't
keeping up
buy a
with the Joneses
car.
mentality. You're in the locker room, other guys are doing it. I get it. And that's hard, but take a sacrifice now to be successful later.
I met a player later on in life, but I thought he's crazy, but he's smart. Juju McSchuster, he
Okay,
used
yeah.
to ride a scooter to practice every day
Did he really?
for 3 years in Pittsburgh at that, in
It's
the
cold in
snow.
Pittsburgh. Yeah, it gets
He
cold
would
there.
ride a bike or a
Yeah.
scooter
Did he
every
do that in
day.
Kansas City too? That's also cold.
I'm like, are you gonna get a car? He's like, yeah, when I sign my second contract, I'm not getting a car when I in my first contract. I'm
Smart
like,
man, though. Smart man. He got good advice. Someone give him good advice there because that's actually a really, it's crazy. You're
I
right.
was like, that's so smart. He's like, I got an apartment, walking distance from this facility. If I need to go anything else related to the team, they're gonna take me and I'm good to go. And I'm like,
Smart
that's
man.
smart, actually. You're right. You got a bike.
Smart.
He got a really nice bike. They gave him a really nice bike.
Even better, get it given to you, right? Don't pay for it.
Yeah, don't make asset purchases and just slow down. And that's the same for like child stars.
Mhm.
We see a lot of young influencers that have become like household names.
Right.
And how many times have we heard a household name child star's tragedy in their older age? And so
Oh, they're so well documented. Yeah.
so well documented. But at the same time, like, we are such a we're in a world of like constantly competing with people that we don't know. And
Right.
and that's where it's like, I understand that we're all young when we come into that money and it's a very fine line to tote and it's a hard one, but making sure that you and your family knows this is the strategy behind it. Let's all get on the same boat. If we're not, then you just go ahead and get off.
Right.
But all of those people pay or play a key into those decisions because mom can go spend, dad can go spend, grandma needs to be taken care of. And so
Right.
understanding there are things to set up for those type of people that are in your life and have impacted you, but just make sure that everybody's on
And
the
in our world, we would call that estate planning. And that's not something you hear athletes say, but it's something they should be thinking about. Estate planning is actually how you make sure those vehicles work properly without taking all of your wealth away.
Yeah. Don't just buy your houses in an LLC, put them in a trust. And they're like, what's a
Right.
trust?
And understand how that works and understand if you want to pass it on to others and divide, like how that's going to affect you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, this has just been an incredible conversation. Thank you for joining me here today, Morgan. So
First.
let's wrap it up. Give me one last thing, one last piece of advice you want to get out there into the world. What would it be?
Please come to Armanino first.
Agreed. Yeah.
Um, but I would say that, one last piece of advice. Let me think of that. My last piece of advice would be to, if you are trying to understand what it is that you want to do and how to align your passions behind your success, and you want to grow that, being intentional about that and the people that you involve in it, constantly asking questions, not being afraid to fail, but be professionally skeptic enough to know that you do have to ask those tough questions. And then also to always vetting those people that you are sharing your ideas with,
Trust but verify. Yeah.
always vetting those people and be a leader, not a follower, because there's so many things out there that we could follow, like, oh, they're doing that. I could do that. That's not always right for you,
That's
right?
not always a good idea. You don't know why they're doing that. Yeah.
What your friends are sharing at lunch is not necessarily something that you should be in. But if your friends are sharing something at lunch, then find an accredited professional to ask those questions to and see if that's something that's good for you. And so I think that just being intentional about yourself as well as whatever you are using as your strategic drivers, I think that people will ultimately always be successful, right?
I love that. Yeah. Have a vision and a strategy and then use trusted experts that can help you get there. Makes
Yeah.
sense.
Build your
Awesome.
board. What do we say? Build your advisory board to
Build your
life.
board of advisors. Yeah.
Yes. To your
Yes,
life.
I like that. Be the CEO of your life. Build your board of advisors. We're going to write a book on this, Morgan. This is fantastic.